She barely felt it happen. A single thorn on a rosebush caught the tip of her finger while she was pruning in her garden in Missouri. One tiny prick out of the dozens a gardener collects every season. A bead of blood, a quick wince, and she went right back to work. She didn't clean it, didn't bandage it, and didn't think about it again. There was nothing to think about. 3 weeks later, a small bump appeared where the thorn had gone in. Then a second bump appeared higher up near her wrist. Then a third further up her forearm. One by one, in a slow, deliberate line, something was climbing up her arm toward her elbow, and no medicine anyone gave her seemed able to make it stop. Gardeners get pricked. It's part of the deal. Anyone who spends real time with roses, or thorny shrubs, or bags of soil and mulch, ends up with hands that are constantly nicked, scratched, and stabbed by something. 99 times out of 100, or more, it means absolutely nothing. The skin closes up and you've forgotten it ever happened by the time you're washing the dirt off in the sink. She was a healthy woman with a healthy immune system and years of gardening behind her. She'd been pricked by roses more times than she could possibly count, and it had never once caused a problem. So when that one thorn got her, it didn't even register as an event. It was just background noise, the ordinary tax you pay for a beautiful garden. If you had told her that this specific prick, indistinguishable from 1,000 others, was about to launch a slow invasion up her arm that would take months to defeat, she would not have believed you. Because the thing the thorn carried into her finger had been sitting in the soil and on the plant all along, waiting for exactly this, a small break in the skin. The thing on the thorn was a fungus. Its name is Sporothrix, and it's one of the more quietly common organisms in the outdoor world. It lives in soil, in decaying plant matter, in hay and timber, and famously on rose thorns and in sphagnum moss, the kind of moss used in gardening and floral arrangements. Handling any of it can expose you. In fact, in the United States, this fungus turns up most often in gardeners and outdoor workers across Oklahoma and the Mississippi and Missouri River valleys, which is exactly the kind of region she was gardening in. Out in the cool soil, Sporothrix grows as a mold, a fine web of threads, completely harmless as long as it stays outside your body. But this fungus has a trick that makes it dangerous. It's what scientists call dimorphic, which means it can exist in 2 different forms depending on temperature. In the cool outdoors, it's a mold, but warm it up to the temperature of the human body, and it changes. It converts into a rounded, budding yeast, a form built to live and multiply inside warm tissue. So the moment that thorn pushed a few fungal spores through her skin, it delivered them into the one environment where they could turn into something that grows in a person. For a while, nothing seemed to happen, and that silence is part of what makes this disease so easy to miss. Sporothrix is slow. It doesn't cause an immediate, angry infection the way a bacterium might. It takes root quietly under the skin at the entry point and begins to establish itself, and the average time before the first sign appears is around 3 weeks. 3 weeks is a long time. Long enough that by the time anything shows up, most people have completely forgotten the little prick that started it. She certainly had. When the first sign finally came, it was almost nothing. A small, firm bump on her finger, right where the thorn had gone in weeks earlier. It didn't hurt much, if at all, which is one of the strange hallmarks of this infection. It looked for all the world like an insect bite, or maybe a little pimple or blister that would come to a head and clear up on its own. So that's what she assumed it was. A bug bite. Something that had nipped her out in the garden. But it didn't clear up. Instead, over the following days, that small bump slowly grew, darkened, and then broke open into a shallow, crusted ulcer that simply would not heal. A sore that lingers for a week or two is just annoying. A sore that sits open and refuses to close starts to feel wrong. She kept an eye on it, waiting for it to scab over and vanish the way small wounds are supposed to, and it didn't. And then, while she was still puzzling over the first one, a new bump appeared. This one was not on her finger. It was higher up, closer to her wrist, on skin the thorn had never come near. That second bump was the moment this stopped being a simple sore and became something else. Because how does a wound spread to a spot the thorn never touched? Over the next couple of weeks, the pattern made itself horribly clear. The second nodule ulcerated just like the first. Then a third appeared, higher still, up her forearm. Then the beginnings of a fourth. And there was nothing random about where they landed. Each new sore sat higher than the last, forming a line, a straight, deliberate track of raised red and purple nodules and open sores that marched in sequence from her fingertip up toward her elbow. There is something uniquely unnerving about watching an infection move in a direction, and move with purpose. Instead of flaring everywhere at once like an ordinary rash, this came as a slow procession, each new lesion appearing a little closer to her elbow than the one before, as if something inside her arm were making steady, unhurried progress toward her shoulder. What she was watching, without understanding it, was the fungus traveling. When Sporothrix takes hold in the skin, it doesn't just sit in one spot. It spreads along the body's lymphatic vessels, the fine drainage channels that run just under the skin and carry fluid back up the limb toward the heart. The fungus uses them like a ladder. It climbs from one point to the next, and at each stop it sets up a new colony that swells and ulcerates. Doctors even have a name for this exact pattern: Sporotrichoid spread. It's the single most recognizable signature of this disease, and this climbing lymphatic form is by far the most common one, accounting for more than 3 out of every 4 cases, which makes what happened next all the more frustrating. By now, she was clearly unwell enough to see a doctor, and she showed them an arm with a line of angry sores creeping up it. To a general eye, that looks like a spreading skin and soft tissue infection, and the most common cause of that is bacteria. So the working diagnosis was cellulitis, a bacterial infection of the skin, or something in that same family. She was put on antibiotics. It was a completely logical first move. And it did nothing. She went back. She was given a second opinion, a different prescription, and reassurances that it would settle down soon. It did not settle down. With every passing week, the fear grew, because whatever this was, it was clearly winning, and the professionals she trusted couldn't seem to put a name to it, let alone stop it. The sores kept advancing. A round of antibiotics would finish, and the line on her arm would be a little longer than when she'd started. Sometimes a different antibiotic was tried, or a stronger one, and still the climb continued, patient and unbothered. From the outside, it looked like an infection that was somehow beating every drug thrown at it, which is a terrifying thing to watch happen on your own body. But the drugs weren't failing because the infection was tough. They were failing because it wasn't a bacterial infection at all. The thing climbing her arm was a fungus, and antibiotics do absolutely nothing to a fungus. Quick pause before we get to how they finally caught it and what it took to stop it. If you're into this kind of story, hit subscribe in the pathogen channel, because a new case like this one goes up every week. And if you have a garden, the ending of this one is worth remembering. Now, back to that arm and the line still climbing it. What finally cracked the case was the pattern itself. That neat ascending line of sores is unusual, and to a doctor who recognizes it, it points almost like an arrow straight at the answer. A sharp clinician, or a dermatologist, or an infectious disease specialist sees a straight chain of ulcers climbing a gardener's arm and thinks of exactly one thing first: the rose gardener's fungus. To be certain, they take a small sample, a biopsy of one of the nodules, and send it to a lab to be grown in culture, because the definitive way to catch Sporothrix is to cultivate it and identify it under a microscope. When the culture came back, there it finally was. The fungus confirmed. After weeks of chasing a bacterial ghost, she had a real name for what was on her arm. The good news is that once it's correctly identified, Sporotrichosis is very treatable. The bad news is that treating it is a marathon rather than a quick fix. The main weapon is an antifungal drug called itraconazole, taken as a daily pill. There's also an older, cheaper option, a solution of potassium iodide that has been used against the same disease for more than a century. Either way, the treatment doesn't run for days or even weeks. It runs for months. She would have to keep taking that medication faithfully long after the sores began to fade, and typically for weeks beyond the point where her skin looked healed, just to make sure every last bit of the fungus was gone and it couldn't quietly start climbing again. And slowly over those months, it worked. The climb stopped. The active sores dried up, flattened, and began to heal from the deepest ones outward. The invasion up her arm, which had felt unstoppable while everyone was treating the wrong thing, turned out to be very stoppable the moment someone was finally treating the right thing. She kept her arm, she kept her health, and she made a full recovery. It's worth being clear about the stakes here, because this disease is frightening in a very specific way. In a healthy person like her, Sporotrichosis is not a killer. It is slow, it is stubborn, it is disfiguring, and it can leave a trail of scars up the arm where the sores healed. But the classic skin and lymphatic form does not take your life. The real danger of it is time. It's how long it hides, how convincingly it mimics an ordinary infection, and how far it can climb before anyone lands on the right diagnosis. There are rarer, far more serious forms of Sporotrichosis that spread deeper into the body. But those overwhelmingly strike people whose immune systems are already severely weakened, which is a very different story from the healthy gardener with a line of sores on her arm. So, what do you actually do with all this? Two simple things. The first is prevention, and it costs almost nothing. If you garden or handle soil, mulch, hay, or moss, wear gloves and think about long sleeves when you are working around thorny plants like roses. That thin barrier is often all it takes to keep a fungal spore from riding a thorn into your skin in the first place. It is genuinely the single most effective thing you can do. The second is about catching it early, and it could save someone months of misery. If you get a prick or a scratch while gardening, and weeks later a bump shows up at that exact spot that won't heal, and especially if new bumps start appearing in a line heading up your arm, do not simply accept that it is a bug bite or a routine skin infection. Tell the doctor about the gardening, about the thorn, and say the word Sporotrichosis out loud. That one piece of history, a thorn followed by a climbing line of sores, can point a doctor straight at the answer and cut months off the chase. It started with a rose, not a jungle, not a far-off country, not some rare and exotic exposure. Just a thorn in a backyard garden, the kind of tiny prick that every gardener ignores 100 times a year. And from that single point, something climbed her arm one patient step at a time, for weeks, while the world around her treated it as nothing at all. That is what makes this one linger. If this made you want to go grab a pair of gardening gloves, do me a quick favor and tap the like button, because it helps this reach the next person about to reach bare-handed into a rose bush. And subscribe to the Pathogen channel, because every week I break down another true case of the human body under siege. And this is the third small cut story on this channel, so if you want the other two, watch how a tiny cut in a warm Louisiana bayou nearly cost a man his arm in a single day, and how a scratch in an Oklahoma backyard locked a woman's jaw shut in 8. Both are on screen right now.